It's a great privilege to present our speaker, Mrs. Irina Nevzlin, the distinguished family, distinguished guests. It's a great privilege because I do have deep appreciation to Irina. She is a great lady, smart, does have experience and devoted to the Beit Hatfutsot, a very important project. I don't want to take from your time, so you are kindly invited, please.
Hello, everyone. Yep, let's try to. Turns out I'm much shorter than Amos. Okay, now. Hi, I'm honored to be here. After me, you'll hear from a distinguished panel about the relationship between Israel and the United States. So I'm going to talk to you about the relationship between Jews in both countries. I was thinking how we can define what this relationship are going through, and I decided to look at it as a couple that is going through a crisis. So if a couple, at some stage of their life, is going through a crisis, there are three essential steps that are needed to make sure that they overcome it. First, they need to realize that they are not victims of the situation. Second, they need to understand that they are stronger together. And third, they need to create a vision for the future. So let's take a closer look. So when a married couple decides to come to therapy, they first need to accept the fact that they're not victims. Many times you hear things like, well, I can't find a good job because we are moving around your job so much. And there's blaming and there's blaming. But if both sides keep blaming each other, they won't be able to have any relationships. We can see the similarities in the Jewish world. Israeli Jews are not the victims of the American Jews. And the American Jews are not the victims of the Israeli Jews. We need to stop the blame game and take responsibility, because uniting around victimhood is not working anymore. I want to share with you some other examples of this victimhood phenomenon, which is currently happening in Israel and elsewhere. So Israeli left feels that they're victims of the right-wing government because it has been in power, and some say not so effectively, for 10 years. Israeli right feels itself a victim of the left because even though they are majority of the population, they still remain insignificant in the media. Women feel victims of the traditional world dominated by men. Men feel victims of the Me Too movement. Jews feel victims of Arabs, and Arabs feel victims of Jews. Elites feel that they're victims of the majority, of the stupidity of the majority. And the majority is absolutely convinced that they're the victims of the cynical elites. And this goes on and on. We can't deny the victimhood phenomenon. What we need to do is to stop, accept it, learn from it, and move on. Because when we choose to be victims, we automatically accept that we're helpless. And where does this path of victimhood and blaming take us? Absolutely nowhere. We're wasting energy on staying in the same place, and we are doing nothing to improve our lives. So this is my first suggestion for the couples therapy between Israeli Jews and American Jews. Let's stop being victims. Now, staying together. Why should Jewish people stay together? I'll tell you why. Because for thousands of years, Jewish people were the most powerful network in the whole world. We not only survived as a big family, we thrived as a big family. Being part of this global family is exactly what makes us stronger. Belonging makes us more open-minded, resilient, and ready for changes. So why fight if being together is what makes us stronger? And then we should have a clear picture, a clear vision of what we want from our future. Because unless the couple has the clear understanding of how their future looks like, why would they try to solve this crisis in the first place? So I have a suggestion. Let's come together and create a uniting vision, a new long-term vision that will bring together Israel and the Jewish people around the world. There was a picture there of a nice guy, good-looking guy, Theodor Herzl. Here he is. 50 years before the establishment of the State of Israel, he wrote the book, my favorite book of all times, Medinat HaYehudim. Medinat HaYehudim was exactly that. It was a forward-looking vision that united then a majority of Jews. It's now time we create Herzl Volume 2. Herzl Volume 2 is a vision that should include both universal values as well as practical solutions. We need to decide which values are important for us today: freedom, tolerance, unity. And what solutions do we have in the fields of education, economy, security, and healthcare? The world is changing very quickly, and many things from the past are not going to work anymore. Each of us should stop and think what he wants for himself, for the country, and for the Jewish people. Only then we can make this relationship work. So I go back to my formula. In order for the couples therapy to be successful, we need to make sure three things happen. First, stop being victims. Second, realize we are stronger together. And third, create a vision for the future. Thank you.
Irina, I have to tell you that the minute you quoted Herzl from that book, you had the attention of Professor Reichman. It's his favorite book, which is why he built this Zionist university. So you have something in common, you know? It's nice. The same Zionist blood flows in the veins of all of us. Good job, Irina. And also thank you for running that fantastic organization that you run, okay, next to Tel Aviv University, the Museum of the Diaspora, okay, because we come to many exhibits there, and I think you do a lot, okay, to basically promote the Jewish culture of different people from around the world. We even went to the Bob Dylan exhibit. We thought it was great. So thank you for doing what you do. We appreciate it. Let's have a hand for Irina Nevzlin. Now, it is my pleasure. I've just met a fantastic group of congresspersons from the United States, and it's my honor and privilege to read out the CV of Congressman Ted Deutsch, who represents Florida's 22nd District, home to communities in northern Broward County and southeastern Palm Beach County in sunny South Florida. Now serving a sixth term in the 116th Congress, he's the chairman of the House Ethics Committee and a senior member of the House Judiciary Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where he serves as the chairman of the Middle East, North Africa, and International Terrorism Subcommittee. Ted has been described as a rising voice in the House Democratic Caucus by the Washington newspaper Roll Call, and was previously named one of the Forward newspaper's top Jewish politicians to watch. I had the privilege a few moments ago of meeting some of the other congresspersons, many of them from the great state of Texas, and one fantastic young woman from Puerto Rico. And I have to tell you that I think you represent your country in a very, very fine way. I got the feeling that we share a lot of great values together. And I think there can't be a nicer place for you to be than the Herzliya Conference, and nicer people than you to be here. So let's have a hand for these fantastic congresspersons and for Ted Deutsch as well. Ted, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to just put that down. All right. Thanks very much for the kind introduction. Erev Tov, nice to be here. It is a real privilege to have the opportunity to address you all at this important conference 36 years after my first visit to Israel as a high school student on Ramah Seminar. It's special to be joined by my wife Jill and several outstanding young people from my home community of Boca Raton, Florida. I'm thrilled to be here with all of them. It's an honor to be here at the IDC conference. Today about Amos Gilad for the invitation. And though the IDC was founded only 25 years ago, it's built itself a reputation for its world-class degrees, advanced student body, prominent alumni, and really important conferences like this one. I'm the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on the Middle East, North Africa, and International Terrorism, and I am here, as you heard, with a bipartisan delegation of 10 members of Congress. We represent diverse people with political views that span the ideological spectrum, and we live in districts scattered all across the United States. I am proud to represent South Florida, which is a blend of cultures from around the world, where Jewish retirees who spent their working years in the Northeast in New York and New Jersey live side by side with Canadian snowbirds, and where Cubans who fled Castro live alongside the Jewish community of Miami Beach, another warm beach city where your fine ambassador to the United States grew up. I'm proud to be joined here by my fellow Floridians, Congressman Bilirakis, whom you'll hear from in a second, from Tampa, Florida, and Congressman Soto from Orlando. And as a large and politically purple state, as we say, our districts from across Florida bring unique perspectives to the priorities to Washington, D.C. that resemble a microcosm of America's political landscape. That's the reason that President Trump and every one of the Democratic candidates for president spend so much time and so much energy in Florida. Our colleagues from outside the Sunshine State include Congressman Randy Weber and Congressman Henry Cuellar from Texas, Congresswoman Sherry Bustos from Peoria, Illinois, Congressman Scott Peters from Southern California, Congresswoman Kathleen Rice from Long Island, New York, as if there's another Long Island, Congresswoman Jennifer Gonzalez Colon from Puerto Rico, and Congresswoman Amada Radowagan from American Samoa. But we are all here, as we get ready for this panel, we are all here, Democrats and Republicans alike, because we believe that the historic U.S.-Israel relationship is important, it's vital, and we strive to make it even stronger. We represent a majority of the United States Congress from both parties that does not waver in our strong support for the State of Israel. And our support is not a hollow gesture of goodwill. We support Israel because we know that Israel is our strongest ally in a volatile region. We know that the United States is stronger and safer when Israel is stronger and safer. We know that Israel is a democracy with a robust political system and, to put it mildly, vibrant, independent press. We know that Israel shares our values of individual freedom, human rights, equality, and rule of law. And because of all of this, we, as supporters and friends of Israel, can occasionally disagree with political decisions made in Israel, but never doubt our commitment to our great ally and to ensuring Israel's lasting security and respect for decisions made by Israel's democratically elected government. And we wholeheartedly reject any effort by anyone that seeks to delegitimize Israel or undermine Israel's very right to exist. Now, I'd like to emphasize something that I've been asked about since arriving in Israel, and that's this. Strong bipartisan support for Israel in the United States and in the United States Congress has not changed. Despite the voices of a small minority, the United States Congress does not and will never hesitate to ensure that Israel must always have what she needs to defend herself against any and all threats. A bipartisan Congress will not waver standing up to efforts to delegitimize Israel, whether at the United Nations, in Geneva, or anywhere else in the world, and that includes opposing economic warfare against Israel in the form of BDS. And Congress will never fail to support our major strategic ally in the face of any threats to its security, whether rockets and terror kites from Gaza, missiles from Hezbollah in Lebanon, terror tunnels in the north and south, the IRGC near the Golan, or Iran's nuclear and regional ambitions. Israel has survived attacks from neighboring states in multiple wars. But while the threat of all-out war by neighboring states has decreased through peace agreements with Jordan and Egypt, and Gulf states who have shared security concerns, terrorist groups like Hezbollah and other Iranian proxies pose a serious risk of harm through hundreds of thousands of rockets pointed at Israel. And we understand that. Hamas maintains its stranglehold on Gaza and threatens Israel through underground tunnels and incendiary kites. The war in Syria produced instability and fostered the rise of extremist groups that challenge Israel's safety. Finally, Iran remains a serious threat to Israel, both directly and indirectly through its proxies. Iran's support for terrorist groups, missile development, destabilization of the region, and horrific human rights abuses have increased in recent years. And as a matter of deeply personal concern to me, Iran still holds American hostages, including my constituent, Bob Levinson from Coral Springs, Florida. Iran's recent provocations in the Gulf and the downing of an American drone have heightened tensions between the United States and Iran and have reignited threats to the region and to Israel. Together, we, as a Congress and as a nation, have been unwavering in our support for Israel's right to defend itself against these threats. And while we appropriately focus much of our attention on Israel's security, our relationship goes much deeper than national defense. And that's what Congress remembers every day. Since Israel's founding, Americans and Israelis have collaborated on everything from biomedical research to new agriculture techniques, from the smartphone to autonomous vehicles. I recently introduced legislation with my colleague Joe Wilson, the ranking member of the Middle East Subcommittee, that builds upon the many existing collaborative projects between our countries and encourages even more. The bill has strong support from more than 240 members of the House of Representatives, and we believe that this bipartisan legislation is a natural next step toward building the U.S.-Israel relationship even stronger. It enhances the existing cooperation in areas from energy to cybersecurity and encourages new areas of collaboration in sectors like healthcare, technological research and development, and even humanitarian assistance. These are all things we do not just because we enjoy working with Israelis or because our scientists like having a reason to come to the beaches in Tel Aviv. We do this work because collaboration benefits both of our countries, advances both of our national interests, and can lead to achievements that can and have literally changed the world. Now, we meet here just 1 week after the administration's Bahrain workshop intended to develop an economic plan that would accompany a political solution to the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. I am not here to endorse or reject the administration's efforts to find a resolution that works for all parties, but I strongly believe that our shared goal must remain direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians, ultimately someday leading to two states for two peoples, a secure Israel and a demilitarized Palestinian state. The goal is a strong, safe, and secure Jewish state of Israel with greater inclusion in the entire international community, and a Palestinian state focused on providing for its people and building its economy, and that will require Palestinian leadership to return to the negotiating table. Congress acted to pass the Taylor Force Act with overwhelming bipartisan support because we believe that no United States taxpayer should be spending its tax dollars to reward terrorists. But terminating United States security assistance and humanitarian aid to the Palestinians are decisions that ultimately could impact Israel's security and potentially hinder the path to two states. Security and humanitarian assistance increases stability in the West Bank and, I believe, is crucial to preventing terror attacks against Israelis. Humanitarian assistance in Gaza prevents Hamas from tightening its stranglehold over Gazans even more. And frankly, I believe that humanitarian assistance is more than merely a tool to achieve certain political aims. Providing humanitarian assistance is living up to America's core values. And finally, we're committed to fostering greater regional cooperation and integration between Israel and its neighbors and the United States. Congressman Bilirakis and I co-chair the Congressional Hellenic-Israel Alliance, focused on increasing cooperation between the U.S., Israel, Greece, and Cyprus, and we recently introduced legislation that will enhance cooperation in fields like energy and security. Our delegation will travel to Cyprus to continue to discuss ways to expand these relationships. I'll finish with this. Our approach to these issues is straightforward. The United States will continue to work to ensure that wherever there are shared values, shared threats, or continued opportunities, that Israel is included as our ally and as our partner. And so that's the message we wanted to bring to you. And I would conclude by thanking you for giving us that opportunity. Too often, messages get lost or misconstrued as they cross continents and time zones between the United States and Israel. And while I am just one American politician sharing my perspective, I am proud to share what I want everyone to understand is a very clear and unwavering message of support and solidarity. It's a message I bring from Boca Raton in South Florida. It's a message from the United States Congress, and it's a message from the United States of America. I'm most grateful for this opportunity. Toda rabah.
I want to thank Congressman Ted Deutsch for his reassuring remarks about bipartisan support for the State of Israel in the Congress of the United States. I also want to tell you, Ted, that I'm a graduate of Camp Ramah myself. Spent 9 years at Camp Ramah in Ojai, California, which is where I learned a lot about Israel at camp. What can I tell you? And a few other things we'll discuss afterwards. Okay. Now, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Congressman Gus Bilirakis, who is a ranking member of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee on Veterans Affairs and co-chair of the Congressional Hellenic-Israel Alliance. Gus M. Bilirakis is a Republican from Palm Harbor, representing Florida's 12th Congressional District. He was first elected to Congress on November 7, 2006, and is currently serving his sixth term in the United States House of Representatives. As a young boy, Gus learned the importance of public service from his father, Michael Bilirakis, who represented Florida's 9th Congressional District from 1983 to 2006. The elder Bilirakis also instilled in his son a pride in the family's Greek heritage, which Gus proudly carries into his career today. Gus? Your stocks and shares are high because we have a great relationship with Greece. Just tell them to stop beating us in soccer and basketball all the time.
All right, that's a deal. That's a deal. I appreciate it so very much. Folks, this is it's really nice to be here. And I know we have a lot of friends in the audience from the U.S., but also from Israel. I've been here 5 times. That's how much I love it. And I have my son, Teddy, here. But, you know, first of all, in my opinion, it's a no-brainer to be pro-Israel on all the issues. And if you rated me, I'm sure I would be 100%. But I just love you because you're just wonderful, wonderful, genuine people, and you're great friends. I don't represent a large Jewish community. I'm in the Tampa Bay area, Pinellas County. Some of you know that. But the best friends that I have are the ones that, and most of them, again, are Jewish. They come to me when they see that I have an issue, a problem. I'm not talking about politics or fundraising. I'm talking about true friendship. So I consider myself part of the family. I want to thank you. I want to thank Professor Reichman and Major General Gilad for inviting me to speak today, and all of my friends here. This is my first time attending this conference, although I've been here in Israel 5 times, and can't wait to come back after It is truly an honor to be among such distinguished guests. I'm grateful to Chairman Deutsch, who's my very good friend, for asking me to join him for this visit to Israel at a critical time for this region and for the United States. I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you what the United States Congress is doing as part of our commitment to the United States-Israel bilateral relationship. As we endure these stormy waters, Congress is looking for solutions to support security and stability in this region. The United States stands squarely with Israel in countering Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, and other threats that seek to wipe Israel off the map. But part of guaranteeing enduring security for Israel is ensuring that Israel has other partnerships that can grow as strong as the U.S.-Israel relationship. We often say that Israel has no better friend than the United States, but that's not enough. But we should also aspire to reach a point where Israel has many friendships as close to its partnership with the U.S. To this end, I want to focus on our shared opportunity to strengthen not only the U.S.-Israel relationship, but other regional partnerships. I serve as co-chair, as Ted said. I'm co-chair of the Hellenic Caucus, being of Greek descent, and I will tell you, as far as the cultures are concerned, they're practically the same. So I co-chair the Hellenic Caucus and the Congressional Hellenic-Israel Alliance, again, along with my good friend, Ted Deutsch. I was a vocal champion of strengthening partnerships between the United States and its most critical allies in the Eastern Mediterranean, Israel, Greece, and the Republic of Cyprus, the only true democracies in this region, in my opinion. The very purpose of this Hellenic-Israel Alliance is to support Israel in navigating these stormy waters as she takes a course less traveled. Israel, Greece, and Cyprus, and the United States are all bonded by common ideals, with democracy at the cornerstone. And I know that this is a true democracy in the Middle East. I also know that there's religious freedom in Israel, the only country in the Middle East that has true religious freedom. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have dinner with my patriarch in about an hour after I leave this conference, Patriarch Theophilos. Israel's trilateral partnership with Greece and Cyprus is vital, particularly as the region endures constant challenges and threats. These countries in the Eastern Mediterranean have an obligation to strengthen their ties, because the stronger their bonds, the greater the opportunity for building a more prosperous and peaceful future. Now, I'd like to mention that the Greeks are going to have a snap election on July 7th, and whoever wins that election, of course I have my favorites, but I don't decide who's the Prime Minister of Israel or the Prime Minister of Greece or the President of Cyprus. The people do. They live here. But I will tell you, I guarantee this, you will have a pro-Israel leader in Greece, no matter who wins. The Greek-Israeli, yes. The Greek-Israeli and Cypriot Cooperation Initiative has been one of the most successful developments of the past decade and has laid the foundation for regional cooperation on a variety of goals that are crucial to the international community. These trilateral discussions are now commonplace, creating and facilitating the development of mutually beneficial partnerships around a broad range of areas, including economic cooperation, culture, and education. I believe strongly that energy is key to cementing this budding alliance. The discovery of hydrocarbons in the Eastern Mediterranean has motivated countries within the region to work together in order to maximize the benefits of these natural resources. The U.S. Geological Survey assessments indicate that the Eastern Mediterranean region holds large quantities of natural gas and oil. It is in the United States' best interest to ensure that these resources held by allied nations contribute to the availability of affordable energy. This development can help ensure the long-term financial sustainability of the region. Energy potential and its accompanying economic benefit has become a tool of cooperation and alignment of initiatives that would create an economy of scale and invite investment while meeting the energy security needs of the region. This is precisely the reason why Ted and I formed the Congressional Hellenic-Israel Alliance, or CHIA. Michael Orden, I believe he's in the audience. He was also instrumental when we formed the alliance several years ago. The Greece-Cyprus-Israel partnership we have strengthened through our work at CHIA. It offers new example of cooperation in an increasingly turbulent Eastern Mediterranean region. It is also why Ted and I co-introduced, as he said, the Eastern Mediterranean Security and Energy Partnership Act, which will enable the U.S. to support this developing trilateral relationship through energy and defense cooperation, and really further its potential to bring in more allies in the group, and that's only good for the United States. By strengthening this partnership, we can promote stability within the region and maximize the benefits for all parties. Our bipartisan support for this measure and for strengthening Israel's partnerships in the region mirror our bipartisan commitment to the U.S.-Israel relationship and Israel's security. And I will tell you that, as Ted said, we do work in a bipartisan fashion for the most part to support our greatest ally, Israel, in the United States Congress. And that's the way it should be. And we should not use Israel as any type of a political tool during the campaign either. So I strongly believe that. As you can tell from this large and bipartisan delegation of House members composed of members representing different states and different committees, the support for Israel in Congress is broad-based. We want to work together to keep our alliance up to date and reflective of the evolving challenges we both face. I commend Ted not only for leading the delegation, but for his work on a new U.S.-Israel cooperation bill, which I'm proud to co-sponsor. Hopefully we get that across the finish line as soon as possible, Ted. Israel can count on its bipartisan friends in the United States Congress to ensure that our partnership never wavers. Again, thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. I assure you that the Congressional Hellenic-Israel Alliance will continue to do everything in its power to foster a productive relationship between these important allies, if I have anything to do with it, and if Ted has anything to do with it. We're just getting started. Doing so offers a multitude of benefits for all parties and contributes to the promotion of peace in a volatile part of the globe. Let's see. So, thank you very much again. I appreciate your time and commitment to this very important issue, and God bless you. Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you very much, Congressman Bilirakis. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to invite to the stage the panel of experts that now with whom we will hold the moderated discussion. And we start with the Honorable Senator Mark Kirk, the former U.S. Senator for Illinois, Mr. David Makovsky, the Distinguished Fellow with the Washington Institute and a former senior advisor for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations at the State Department, Ms. Danielle Pletka, Senior Vice President for Foreign and Defense Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute, also known as AEI, Ambassador Zalman Shoval, former Ambassador of Israel to the United States, Mr. Boaz Bismuth, the editor-in-chief of Israel Hayom, Dr. Michel Stein-Tier, a rhetoric expert, political communications scholar and head of the Rhetoric Academy here at IDC Herzliya. And last but not least, the moderator is Mr. Udi Segal, who is a chief political analyst and anchor. Please. Who's the chief political analyst and anchor for Reshet 13 TV, and also teaches here at the Samiofa School of Communications here at IDC. Before I pass it on to Udi, you sit on the right-hand side. And Zaman will consider in the middle.
Go for it. Good idea.
Before I pass the baton on to Udi, we have a short clip. Ma'avaron, b'vasha.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having us. Let's start with 3 positive facts. 1, most Americans, voters, whether Democrat or Republicans, support and sympathize with the state of Israel. This is according to a Gallup survey in 2019. Second fact, every president of the United States is a rock star in Israel, whether it's Barack Obama or Donald Trump. Third, we still share the same values and beliefs on most issues. Having said that, my first question and major question to this panel is that we are facing now a very ecstatic political honeymoon between Prime Minister of Israel Netanyahu and the President of the United States Donald J. Trump. And the question is, will we pay a price? Will we have a backlash if something happens in American policy? I would like to start with you, Honorable Senator Kirk, to answer that question.
I would say that let's have a round of applause for Congressman Ted Deutsch for being such a good bipartisan delegation. But I would say, to answer your question, we need to make sure that we follow the policy that I followed in the Senate. When I introduced legislation, I always made sure there was a Democrat with me. And I sometimes joke that my name really should be Menendez Kirk because of the sanctions against Iran. And I took the Senate several times to votes on Israel, where I got 100-0 votes in the Senate. We got to make sure we're always bipartisan.
But do you think that the hug that Israel has from the Republican Party, which is a good thing, and the fact that the President Donald Trump is doing a lot of things that Israeli wants and the Israeli government demands, will it have a price on the Democratic side?
We'll see. My hope is that we should not, that Israel is the best friend of the United States, and the Democratic voters should know that.
Mm-hmm. David Makovsky, a distinguished fellow of the Washington Institute and part of the Kerry team for trying to figure out the Middle East peace plan. You know Democrats, you followed Israeli governments for years. Do you think that Israel has become identified with the Republican Party?
Look, we have a situation, 80% of American Jews vote Democrat. We just heard from Ted Deutsch, I think, a remarkable list of initiatives on strengthening U.S.-Israel relations, the BDS, anti-BDS bill. There's a long list that has a good number, maybe close to half in each case, that are Democrats. So we should not underestimate. You have key Democrats if it's Elliot Engel as the head of Foreign Affairs, Nita Lowey, the head of Appropriations, which is dealing with Taktsivim, as the Israelis would say, budget. There's a very strong support that is sometimes lost because there's a few young members that have come up, AOC and a couple of others, that have gotten a lot of media attention. So I think in the short term, Israel still has very strong bipartisan support. What's my concern? If you look, Udi, the strength of Israel, the genius in Israel in many ways of the U.S.-Israel relationship has been both to identify common interests and common values. Israelis think everything is what they call in Hebrew interessim. It's all interest. And Israel, remarkably, in history, if you look at it, has had the same enemies that America's had. America's had Israel's enemies in terms of the Soviet Union, jihadis today, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah, or if it's Iran. And that has created a commonality of interest that has bound governments and peoples. But the American system is also common values. And people forget that there were issues like Soviet Jewry, Middle East peace, Israel being the only democracy in the Middle East. That commonality of values, in my view, for the American public is no less important than commonality of interest. And my fear is that the equilibrium between common values and common interests and common values is going to get lost. Maybe not now. And I think if you'd have Biden or if you would have Trump, whoever, any of those candidates, that bipartisanship, I mean, that commonality of support will remain. But I'm worried long term that Israelis are, over time, maybe even unconsciously, they stop talking about common values. It's values that bind peoples. And what we've seen with the U.S.-Saudi relationship, and Israel should take notes, what's going on in the U.S.-Saudi relationship. That is a case where the Saudi Arabia said it's all about interest. We have the oil. America needs our oil. So it's interest that counts. But guess what? When you lose a common values, as we've seen with Khashoggi and the war in Yemen, and there's no bipartisanship, it bites you. I won't say where it bites you. It bites you. And that is something Israel needs to be aware. So as you stress commonality of interest, stress commonality of values. If you don't keep that, you've got long-term trouble in the United States. Not short-term, because things, I think, overall are still very, very good.
Ms. Daniel Platka, maybe we took a big step to the right, and the Democrats took a big step to the left, and there's a gap.
Me?
That's an understatement. Look, I mean, I love David Makovsky.
We all do.
I'm admitting it to all of you here today, but I really don't agree with you, actually. I think the values question is really important, but I think that there is increasingly, not just in the United States, but frankly, also in Europe, a sense that Israel belongs to the right, and that, and not all over Europe to the right, but certainly in America and in the UK and in France, except for Le Pen, and that the rest of the world belongs to the left, and the rest of the Middle East. So you see this divide in which the Democrats in the United States have ranged themselves behind Barack Obama on the side of Iran, on the side of, we could even put it more simply, on the side of the Shiites, which is strange, and that the Republicans have ranged themselves on the side of the Sunni and Israel. And that is an unsustainable situation. You know, when you mention the problem that we have with Saudi Arabia and Yemen, that has nothing to do with values. That has to do with partisanship. The murder of Khashoggi doesn't have anything to do with the values of anybody. It has to do with the fact that there is a perception that there is an association with Donald Trump. And that association has poisoned that relationship for the Democrats. This will only get worse, because as much as we'd like to think that if Donald Trump and Joe Biden are the candidates, you know, both of them are in their 70s. They don't represent the future of their party. When Bibi Netanyahu went and spoke at the Center for American Progress, a quite liberal Democrat-associated think tank, there was an internal battle. And it was only because the president finally stood up and insisted that he was allowed to speak there. But then they had to invite the Council on American Islamic Relations to come in to make everybody feel better for having committed the sin of having an Israeli prime minister. So, you know, this is a problem that is going to get worse and worse and worse. And we may think that Rush the Tlaib and AOC represent a small margin because we have these wonderful members of Congress and because we have people like Mark Kirk. And I'm not sure that that represents the mainstream of either party anymore.
All right, I want to go to the Israeli part of this panel and ask you, maybe this is the answer. The problem is not with us. It is because American policy and politics has become so much polarized, so we can't really get this formula of bipartisan together. Zalman Shoval, are we doing the right things to keep this formula, or we're doing mistakes that's shaking it?
First of all, I'd say that after listening to Ted Deutsch and Representative Bilirakis, maybe we don't have a problem. I wish it were so. I do believe that this whole delegation which visits us today is still representative of the United States Congress as it is today. But that's the question. There is a process of realignment, political realignment in the United States. The Republican Party is not going to be the same party. The Democratic Party is not going to be the same party. And I'm not going to characterize in what form or in what shape. But if we look at the Democratic Party, or if we look at Democratic voters' support of Israel, about 27%, and about 60-odd% on the Republican side, we cannot be complacent. And you see today on the Democratic side, although it's a minority, I agree, and I hope it will remain a minority, you have elements which do not share the same values, as you said, who do not share the same strategic interests. They believe America should find new friends in the Middle East, perhaps Iran, less the traditional friends of the United States in the past. And Israel must be aware of that. A few weeks ago, I spoke to Henry Kissinger, who said to me, your prime minister is doing the right thing because he analyzes the situation as it is, and he must act as it is. But of course, we have to look forward to what's going to happen later on. And here there's an element, this is not part of this meeting right now, there's an important element. We speak about the United States and Israel. But we must also speak about the United States, Israel, and the American Jewish community. Because the American Jewish community traditionally supports and supported, and correctly so historically, the Democratic Party. And it must find a way, and Israel must help the American Jewish community to find a way to bridge the gap between the situation that most American Jews, majority, are against the Trump administration for completely different reasons, but at the same time to respect the fact that the Trump administration is the most friendly administration to Israel ever. And if we speak about security, the alliance with America, as had been said many times before, is probably the second most important element in Israel's security. The first important element is Israel's ability to defend itself by itself, but even that is connected with the United States. So I think we should be worried. We should not be complacent about that. I think we should try with the Jewish community in America to find a way, and there were precedents for that. During my ambassadorship, my first term, Shamir was the prime minister, Bush father was the president, and there were terrible controversies about settlements, loan guarantees, and so on. But the Jewish community, including the most liberal one, the reformed one, the most left one, I could say, would say, look, we are opposed to settlements, we are opposed to all sorts of things, but we support Israel's demands on basic things like immigrant absorption and so on. Right now, I think the attitude should be, okay, we don't agree with Trump on this and that and that. And Israel, of course, it's well known, never interferes in American politics. But as the security and future of Israel is concerned, and basically that also means the future and security of the Jewish people in America. These things are linked. We, the Jews in America, hopefully with the help of Israel, and we have made many mistakes too, Israeli governments, we should find a way not to widen the gap, but to try to eliminate it as much as possible.
Okay, Dr. Michel Steintier, do you think that maybe it's a personal chemistry between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Donald Trump that make them sing so much close that you cannot tear them apart, so there's nothing that the Democratic Party can have rather than step aside and be against this policy in the future?
I love to examine the relationships between the leaders of both our countries, and through that try to understand what should it mean in regards to us as people. Now, if we compare the Netanyahu-Obama relationship to the Netanyahu-Trump relationship, we can see that the Netanyahu-Obama relationship is the worst in 70 years of Israel's existence, versus the Obama and the Netanyahu and Trump relationship that has been a love story and may be quoted in the New York Times by Thomas Friedman as Bibi Trump and Donald Netanyahu. Now, you would expect that such a great relationship, interpersonal relationship between these two leaders would maybe lead to good relationship between the people of our countries. But according to that same Gallup poll that you mentioned earlier, the support, American general support for Israel has fallen by 5% to the lowest rate in a decade. Okay, throughout that decade, it raised. That was the Obama time. But now it's fallen from 74% to 69%. Now, that is a dangerous sign that makes you wonder how influential is the personal relationship between our leaders.
I see. Boaz Bismuth is the chief editor of Israel Hayom, Israel Today. He had interviewed President Trump, and I want to ask you, maybe there is a new formula, and the formula is that in America, no one's no other prime minister or politician rather than Netanyahu, because he's serving 10 years in a row and is 13 years, almost the longest prime minister ever served. Mm-hmm. Israel is being identified with Netanyahu. Netanyahu is identified with Trump. So if you like Trump, you like Netanyahu, you like Israel. Mm-hmm. If you hate Trump, you hate Netanyahu, you hate Israel. Isn't that a dangerous formula?
So first of all, concerning Prime Minister Netanyahu, it is true that on the 20th of July, he's going to break the record of David Ben-Gurion, which is kind of amazing. Why do I say kind of amazing? Because you see the perception and what the media offers him every day, not Israeli media, but also in American media. And when you say 69%, I'm amazed. How come still 69% of Americans love Israel when I see a few, how would I say, some of the way that they present us in the media? But only to show all of you how complicated the situation is. Me, maybe editor-in-chief, yet I like very much as a journalist to go on the ground and to see what's going. In November, you had midterm elections. You, of course, remember, it wasn't that long ago. And, of course, journalists from all over the world, they like to go to D.C., they like to go to New York. I mean, it's fun. I prefer to go to West Virginia. I prefer to go to Portsmouth, Ohio, to see Deep America and see, maybe for an Israeli, it was nice because you could see how much they love us inside Deep America. Yet, I was perplexed and even shocked when I reached Florida. And why? Because we spoke before about interest and values. You spoke about values, which I totally share, because this is the strength of our relationship. I do believe, this is what it's all about. And that is why even during Obama time, during Obama's presidency, who some people think he wasn't that pro-Israeli, and we can discuss that, still you had the majority of Americans being on Israel's side. Values or interest. But when you go to Florida, for example, and you see, for example, elections for governor, and you see you've got two candidates. On one hand, you've got DeSantis, big friend of Israel, you all agree with me, big friend of Israel. On the other side, you had, I think it was a certain Golem, more controversy concerning his position concerning Israel. And then you see the Jewish community, and who are they for? Do I ask the panel? So of course you're perplexed. Does this mean that the American community are anti-Israeli? Of course not. It means how complicated and our situations or things or positions do not really depend on us or things that are happening in America on one side, in England on the other side, in France also. And you know, when Mrs. Nevzlin made her presentation, she showed Theodor Herzl. And I think that that's part of the situation, how complicated it is. You showed Theodor Herzl. By the way, it was nice to see in Israel a man with a beard but no kippah. It happens. And then when you showed Theodor Herzl,
and a journalist.
And a journalist, of course.
A mad journalist.
I couldn't not think of a book that you all have to read right now, whether you're in America, France, Europe, The World of Yesterday of Stefan Zweig. You know, Stefan Zweig, he goes to see Theodor Herzl. He doesn't have OSB suit, he has Herzl, a big editor-in-chief. And he goes to present his, an article he wrote or an op-ed he wrote. And why am I mentioning this book? Because it was like the world of yesterday, a changing world. And I do believe, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, no prophet here among this room, not in the panel, but we are like at an end of a cycle. Something is definitely changing, yet at the same time, for those who say we are losing America, I would say, wait a second. You know, you write the future with the ink of the past. We all remember amazing friends of Israel during the among Democrat senators, congressmen. We knew also a period where, on the contrary, Republicans were not given good relations with Israel. So again, let's not hurry with conclusions. Let's wait and see. But I would agree with you. We do share the same values, and this is for me the immense strength of those relations between Israel and America. America, which took to a Democrat, Truman, 11 minutes to recognize the state of Israel.
But can you assess to what extent the Republican support of Israel will go? Okay, so they moved the embassy to Jerusalem or the Stein. Okay, it's symbolic, it's important. They acknowledge the sovereignty of Israel in the Golan Heights, which is, of course, a very big step. But will they go, for example, with a right-wing aspiration of annexation of the West Bank, one-sided? To what extent do you think this alliance between Donald Trump and Netanyahu can still go?
So I would say that whether you're...
Will we make Donald Trump a pro-settlement, for example?
First of all, it's true. I had the chance of interviewing Mr. Donald Trump as a president. I had the chance of interviewing him as a candidate. And I must say that he's a man of word. I mean, in February 2016, just after winning the caucus in Nevada, I interviewed him for the second time, the candidate, and he spoke about the Iran deal. He spoke about transferring the embassy to Jerusalem. He spoke about the Golan, and he spoke about many things. But especially what he spoke is about changing, maybe looking for new, how would I say, changing, I mean, because we tried, and we met many times at Saban Forum, and you worked with Secretary of State Kerry, and of course, great intentions, but it did not work. It did not work. I mean, the think of Israel as, how would I say, Israel being a slim fast, giving, it still didn't work. So maybe by not giving, maybe this time it will work, especially into giving something that it's yours. So this is also a vision. Now, does President Trump, do you agree with him or not? We don't know the deal yet he's got this, how would I say, maybe something that we'll all agree. The fact of wanting or seeking for peace in the Middle East, right or left, in Israel or in America, don't have the monopoly. We all search. The method might differ. And I would say congratulations to a president from a Republican or Democrat who seeks peace for the Middle East and for Israel.
Senator Kirk, do you see a scenario where Donald J. Trump will present the deal of the century that will contains the principle of two-state solution, which I'm not sure it will be inside. I don't know.
One thing I would say that
and Israel can say thank you, but no thank you, or in this relationship that was created, Israel hasn't got the chance to say no.
That Prime Minister Netanyahu has correctly adjusted the relationship between Trump and himself. That we see the president is very attached to personal relationships. So the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump, I would call a full-blown bromance.
All right.
Yeah.
And in terms of policy?
The peace process, I have my worries about it. In the peace process, if we go forward with $50 billion. Being a conservative Republican, I'm not sure USAID carrying out 179 projects can actually affect much of a change. So I worry about the mechanism. And as a former employee of the World Bank, I like that Jared has gone with an idea of a multilateral development bank. But MDBs tend to be pretty slow in their delivery of assistance.
I see. David Makovsky, do you think that maybe the right wing in Israel is not using the relationship with Trump as they should be? Because there's almost one term of this president. We have only 1 year for his first credential. Maybe we'll have second. We don't know. It's 2020. It's very crucial. And someone from the right side of Israel can ask, okay, we've got an embassy in Jerusalem. We've got the sovereignty for Golan Heights is huge. Maybe we can do more, because when the Democratic president will come, maybe we'll undo what this president is doing right now, as we heard that when George W. Bush people said that their policy is ABC, anything but Clinton, and when the people of Obama came to the White House, they took out the W's from the computers. So maybe it will happen to us again.
Okay. Well, first of all, I mean, some of my co-panelists, I think, and I was not someone obviously who supported the Iran deal. I was out of the government at that time. But I think just to be fair to the Democrats here, you know, you had a liberal Democratic president named Barack Obama who put forward an MOU for $38 billion, with a B, billion, for a 10-year period. That's the sort of bipartisanship, I think, that Israel would want to encourage, a big tent. Ehud Barak, when he was defense minister, Netanyahu was prime minister, both said security relations had never been better. So what you want is a president on both sides of the aisle, Republican or Democrat, who thanks the United States, as Netanyahu did, I want to be clear about that, and Barak did, when it came to Obama. So I don't think it helps anybody to demonize the Democrats when they've been so supportive in the past. Going forward, I think you ask an interesting question, which is between now and Trump's election in 2020, there's a game show in America called The Price is Right, and they would usually have a person, usually it's a woman, who was in with a shopping cart and says, you've got 60 seconds, ma'am, to fill up your shopping cart. Right. In other words, between now and November 2020, is Israel going to try to fill up the shopping cart? Is it going to push forward a U.S.-Israel security treaty? This is kind of, the rumors are starting now. Are there going to be other things? Trump is transactional. Is he going to want Netanyahu and his ambassador in Washington, a fellow by the name of Ron Dermer, to go to American churches and talk about how U.S.-Israel relationships are to a key voting bloc, the evangelical community? This will be fascinating to watch between now and November 2020. All I want to say is, in the big picture, Israel has an interest in a big tent, whether it's Democrats and Republicans, whether it's American Jews. When you think of the golden triangle between U.S., Israel, American Jews in the last 50 years, I think it's one of the most miraculous, great news stories in American history. These people work together on $150 billion of aid to Israel, the Soviet Jewry movement, the Ethiopian Jewry movement, the Syrian Jewry movement. I could go on because of bipartisanship. It's in no one's interest to politicize this. This is a great success story, but it requires also Israelis to think big tent. And when I said about Boaz, and I'm glad to see we agree, I'm happy about that. When I see that we agree, so far, okay, you should be worried. My fear is the common values. What I was trying to get at is something I said in the session this morning, which is my fear in a few years from now, the Palestinians will throw in the towel and say, we're not getting anywhere with this two-state solution idea. We don't want a state. We want a vote in Israel. Then I think will be a test. And so instead of Israelis thinking, you know, we're at a theater, we're in the balcony watching Trump Netanyahu, they should be saying, no, we're actually an interactive thing. What our policies are in Israel will impact if we keep this big tent going. And it's a big tent, Dems, Republicans, and I would argue with American Jews too. This isn't just an Israel diaspora issue. This is national security for the state of Israel, that you have an American Jewish community that's so involved, so engaged, and is helping cement the U.S.-Israel relationship. You don't throw it away with Haredi coalition deals and all sorts of things. So we got to think big, both sides of the ocean, how to keep the big tent going, Democrats and Republicans, and also in the wider American Jewish community, whether to the right and to the left, Israel has a big share in what it does in shaping that, not observers.
I would like to ask you again, do you think Israel doing mistakes policy-wise in dealing with the United States in this term of Democrats and Republicans?
I just think, look, there's a Jewish tradition, there's an idea of hakarat hatov.
Yes.
Always be grateful when the president, Israel always should be respectful to an American president, whether it's Democrat or Republican. It wasn't always that way, I felt, in the last term, but okay. But the fact is, hakarat hatov is very important. But what you said before, Udi, in your question about, I think, the level of embrace, that if you love Trump and Trump loves Netanyahu, but it's one thing, but therefore, if I hate Trump, therefore I hate Netanyahu and I hate Israel. That's what you want to avoid. How do you find the right balance between the hakarat hatov, which Israel should have towards Trump, in my view, on these things, and not have such an exclusive embrace that is seen as alienating the other side? Finding that equilibrium, I'm not saying it's easy, but Israel has been brilliant over the generations in keeping the bipartisanship of this relationship. It should be using that same Jewish mind to keep that bipartisanship going forward. Israel has a role to play. It's not just an observer in a theater.
Buzz.
Just one comment. I agree with I definitely, and look, the public is applauding you. I definitely agree with the hakarat hatov, and that is why sometimes I'm very much surprised by the American Jewish community in America concerning Donald Trump, because we in Israel, we have the hakarat hatov, they should have also. You mentioned before President Obama, let me remind you, in December, I mean, one of the last decisions was a resolution that in fact recognized Jerusalem as a settlement. And now we have a president who recognizes Jerusalem as a capital. This is a huge difference. But there is one question I would ask you, is concerning the American Jewish community. We look always to say, where is Israel guilty? Where is Israel's fault? Is Israel guilty in the assimilation you find in American Jews? Are we guilty?
No, absolutely not. I mean, this is a big piece. And when I speak to American Jewish audiences, you know, I say, look, because there's a feeling of an undercurrent here, and we're among friends, I think I could say this, that some Israelis believe that if you're not Orthodox, you're disappearing, and therefore we don't have to take you into account. I personally am modern Orthodox. I might not wear a kippah, but I believe in the big tent. I want a thriving conservative community, a thriving reform community. I want all denominations to thrive. And instead of just saying the Jews are disappearing, what about finding ways, you know, given all the American support for Israel, of Israel trying to say, how do I help support the conservative movement? How do I help support the reform movement so we keep this big tent going? And the same creativity and high tech that Israel is, they're brilliant at it, brilliant. Why can't there be that creativity on strengthening American Jewry as well? I think this would be very important.
Maybe we'll go back for a second for the American politics. Daniel Platka. You know, there's voices here saying, let's ease the tension with voices inside the Democratic Party that is critical for Israel. But maybe we should say, why should we bother? We have the majority of politicians either in the Democratic Party and, of course, all the Republican parties with us. We shouldn't pay attention to those voices. What do you think?
Well, no, that's a terrible suggestion. The right thing for Israel to do is to approach America as America and not try to engage in politicking between the Democrats and the Republicans.
Yes, we leave this part to Russia.
David is completely right. That's, you know, I realize that ship has sailed. And by the way, I have the same counsel for our presidents in the White House. They should keep their noses out of Israeli politics, which, by the way, neither Donald Trump nor Barack Obama nor, frankly, did their predecessors do. But, you know, I do think that it's important to understand something. I worked on Capitol Hill for a long time. I understand that a vote for money for Israel is awesome, and that an MOU for $38 billion is awesome. Guess what? You don't need the money. You like the money, but you don't need that money from us. No, you don't. What you need from us is you need support for an environment in the Middle East that is conducive to Israel's survival. Okay? You need a United States that doesn't want an Iran with a nuclear weapon. You need a United States that wants to fight Hezbollah and Hamas, right? And Al-Qaeda and ISIS. That's what you need.
This is what Donald J. Trump wants. He wants to go back home from Syria.
Hang on a second. That is, at the end of the day, the problem for Israel in the United States, is that there are parts of both of our political parties, our major parties, that wish to disengage from the region, and that if you go generation by generation, you will find that people like us are very supportive, and that people like, the young people who work here and go to school here are not. Right? And that is a huge generational problem. It's not about the money. It's not about the votes. You can get people to vote for cash for Israel, and I believe that will continue. The challenge is a consensus about what our shared national security interests are. And if, in fact, we are going to see a division about those risks, or worse yet, a consensus about pulling back, which is, in fact, what you do see, that presents a real risk for Israel. And so, yes, engagement is really important, but for me, the measure is not how much money. The measure is how much we are willing to stand on these questions that are existential questions for Israel. I just want to make one last point. You keep talking about Jews in Israel as if Jews are single-issue voters. Okay, I don't appreciate it when women talk about women as single-issue voters. And let me tell you, as a Jewish woman, Jews are not single-issue voters. And if you had to rank where Israel was for Jewish voters in America, bingo, right? It's not the top 5. Okay, right. So and I'm not sure there's a strategy to get it there that is desirable.
So this is why most Jews are with the Democrats, although the Republican is being preserved as the most favorite for the Israeli policy right now.
Because Israel isn't what's deciding them.
Zalman Shovan, אני רוצה לשאול אותך, I want to ask you, isn't it too much of a temptation for the Prime Minister of Israel? I want to defend him. He has a president that says, I will give you almost everything you want. All I need is public support. And that's what he's doing. It's the sign in the highway. It's the photo ops, and maybe, as David Makovsky just suggested, maybe a proactive role in his election campaign in 2020. Isn't that a dangerous, slippery slope for the political connection between Israel and the United States?
Yeah, well, not for the first time. I can think back many, many years ago, American presidents or American political parties have played a direct or indirect role in Israeli politics. I mean, when the Labour Party was in power and Democrats were in power, it worked both ways. By the way, when Rabin became prime minister the second time, he refused to meet Clinton, the candidate. He said, I'm for Bush. He was a Republican in his views. I had to convince him to meet Clinton and Gore. But coming back to the question, the way you put it, we must put a limit. We must put a limit. We must not go overboard. I want to vote for Netanyahu not because he is embracing President Trump, but I appreciate the diplomacy, the statesmanship of Netanyahu, who at the same time has a very close relationship with America and a working relationship with Russia, for instance. I think that Netanyahu is a pragmatic person on Israeli politics, on world politics. He has been very successful so far in that respect, not in all other respects. And I think we should continue that. And by the way, the matter of values, we all agree on that this is the basis. But just coming back from the States, I sometimes ask myself, where are the values in America? Are those the same values which we grew up on? There are many things in Israel, perhaps, which are more attractive, but we must be tolerant of each other. And whatever happens, the political parties are changing, the world is changing, Europe is changing, the relationship with America will continue to be the basis for Israel. And you were right to say, not just security. There's much more involved in that.
That's true. And I have a lot of more questions, and you have got a lot more answer, but our time is up. So just let's wish together that this is the last election campaign in Israel in 2019. And happy 2020 election to you, and God bless America. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you.